Today we are going to talk about a comedy movie, Bad Teacher. The film shows that Elizabeth works as a high school teacher, and Elizabeth is a neglectful and rude woman, and she insults the students and makes them watch movies in class during the lesson, and Elizabeth uses drugs and alcohol, and Jean has one goal, which is, marry a rich man and absorb all his wealth. After that, Elizabeth met a very rich businessman, and things were very good for Elizabeth, and one day she arrogantly left her job at the school because she knew that she would not need her anymore. Here, Elizabeth came home and was surprised by the presence of her friend and her mother waiting for him, and the man told Elizabeth that I did not want to marry him. Because he knew that Elizabeth only cares about money, nothing more, and he told her that you stole money from my wallet, from my office, and from a group to buy things that are very expensive, and Elizabeth tries to justify that this thing is not true, but the man refuses to listen to Elizabeth and gets angry and leaves Elizabeth in a tough situation. And this thing destroyed Elizabeth's dream of becoming a rich woman, and the matter was made worse by the fact that she became unemployed, and here Elizabeth tried to find jobs for him for a few months, and Magan had no talents, so no one accepted his employment. So she had to give up his arrogance and pride and return to his old job in middle school, and on his first day, she collides with his old rival, Amy. Then Elizabeth goes to class and the students welcome him again. The students are always educated and content with eating breakfast for the lesson. Here, the students asked for a new lesson from her. Elizabeth turned on the TV and let the students watch the stand-up and delivery program. Elizabeth covered her face with a coat and slept in a row. During the break, Elizabeth reconciles with his only friend at school, Lynn, and Gant is also a teacher. Then we see the sports teacher, his name is Russell, and Jean has a huge passion for Elizabeth, but Elizabeth is free of interest for him forever, because Jean lacks the trait that Elizabeth loves and turns to men for him, which is wealth. One day, a handsome young man named Scott came to the school as a substitute teacher. Elizabeth knew that Scott was a rich young man, and she immediately began to approach him and introduce himself to Scott, and made him smart to talk about his relationships. Elizabeth told him that I was single, and Scott told him that I had separated from my sweetheart. And Scott showed a picture of his girlfriend for Elizabeth, and Elizabeth feels jealous because she saw her beloved Scott having a sweet and sexy body. After that, Elizabeth went to the clinic and filled out the surgery form. And I knew that the operation cost $9,000, so Elizabeth backed out because she did not have this amount, and she had only $50, so she must be patient and wait for the time being. And at night, Elizabeth called all her friends and relatives, hoping that she would get some donations for the operation, and everyone knew Elizabeth, his nature, and his behavior, and everyone refused to help him, and Elizabeth decided to return to his ex-girlfriend and ask him to pay $9,000 as compensation to God for the dissolution of their marriage. But he refuses and plugs the phone in his face, and here is Elizabeth Kalash. The second day in the morning, in the class, Elizabeth was spending her time as usual, and one of the students approached him and asked him if she would like to wash his car. Elizabeth listens to the student and is concerned, but I heard from the student that she earned $6,000 last year from this event. Elizabeth was shocked, and the student was asked about the teacher responsible for this event, and she learned that the responsible teacher was her opponent, Amy. Perhaps, despite Elizabeth's hatred for Amy, she wants to miss this golden opportunity. So she goes to the manager's room and begins to seduce the manager with her appearance, and the manager seduces him and asks him to leave him. Amy, in charge of the car wash event. The manager agreed without thinking. On the second day of the morning, Elizabeth went to the event, dressed in the most seductive clothes, and started washing cars and spraying water on her body, and the women were shocked by Elizabeth's dress, but the men came from Tunisia, and the policeman wanted to support his car when he saw Elizabeth. Elizabeth asks for additional money from the men, and the school tells them that the school is in dire need of additional money for the students, surprisingly. The line is cattle. And by the end of the day, Elizabeth was unable to get $10,000, and she bounced the text of the amount to the school and took the text goddess with a secret. Meanwhile, Amy went to the principal, and she became angry. The second day was the annual meeting of parents at the school, and all the parents gathered in Elizabeth's class because Yano was angry at the way Elizabeth taught their children, and they said to Elizabeth, why you don't explain the lesson and play movies on TV in the class? And Elizabeth replies to them, you are not teaching me about my work. After the meeting ended, he confronted one of the students' parents and gave Elizabeth $200 in secret and asked him to pay more attention to his son. And Elizabeth took advantage of this thing to earn money, and decided to meet with all the parents, one after the other, and take the money from them. She promised them that she would take more care of their children. Currently, Elizabeth needs only $2,000 from breast augmentation surgery. As the days go by, Elizabeth continues to be uninterested in students and neglects them, and Elizabeth refuses the gym coach who offers her, on the one hand, Amy seemed to get close to the rich and handsome Scott, and their relationship became stronger and they became close from some and most of the time it is the same, and this thing made Elizabeth feel very jealous. One day, Elizabeth learned from his friend Lynn that the school will host a competition for teachers, and every teacher tries to make his students get the best grades in the next state test, and the teacher will win a cash prize of $5,000. And when Elizabeth heard this thing, she immediately decided to start teaching her students, and she began to come to school from the moment and teach them and give them homework and daily assignments. This thing continued for several days and the students seemed to improve dramatically, and despite this, passing the upcoming state test is not enough for Elizabeth, and there are only a few days left for the state test, so Elizabeth decides to take matters into her own hands so that she can win and take the $5,000. At night, Elizabeth wore very seductive clothes and went to a government professor named Carl, who was responsible for preparing and distributing test questions. Elizabeth's plan came to pass and seemed to seduce Carl, so she took him to his library, and here Elizabeth put sleeping pills in Carl's drink before he could have a relationship with her. And here Carl fell asleep, and Elizabeth took advantage of the opportunity and stole the questions and threw them to her students. After that, the results of the test appeared, and all of Elizabeth's students passed the test with typical scores, and Elizabeth won the prize, which is $5,000. With this thing, Elizabeth counted the amount sufficient for the operation. Without wasting time, Elizabeth went to the clinic and booked an appointment. However, Elizabeth felt depressed when she knew that Scott wanted to date Amy, and it seems that there was strong love between them, and Elizabeth felt angry because Amy failed his plan for the second time. But Elizabeth did not give in. After that, the school decided to take the students on a tour, and Scott and Amy would be in charge, and Elizabeth knew about this and decided to settle a cunning plan. I injected an apple with some chemicals and kept it in Amy's office. Because Janet knows that Amy loves fruits very much. And here, Amy ate from the apple without asking who put it on the desk. In the evening, Amy's face was covered with rashes and sensitivity, and Amy was afraid of the students from the enemy. That's why the manager let Elizabeth take Amy's place. Then Elizabeth took advantage of the opportunity and tried to get close to Scott, and Bilal had a secret romantic relationship in a second place. Amy decided to search for evidence in order to expel Elizabeth from school. So she went to Elizabeth's class and seemed to turn around, but Janine's drawers were all locked, and Amy decided to replace her desk with Elizabeth's desk. She was about to break and open Elizabeth's drawer and saw the question papers that Elizabeth had stolen from Carl. After that, Amy went to the principal's room and told him that he had deceived Elizabeth in order to help his students get good grades, and this time, the manager rebuked Amy, but told Amy Munkadar to expel Elizabeth unless Carl admitted the matter. So, on the same day, Amy went to find Carl in his office and blackmailed him. He confesses to everything and you eat it. If you don't confess, I will reveal all your mistakes. In public places, and poor Carl agreed. On the other hand, we see Elizabeth spending a sweet Indonesian time. Way students, and I helped one of the students who were bullied. Because he does not have underwear, and he sent a letter to whoever saw Elizabeth's behavior in helping the students, thanking him and praising him for his generosity. Meanwhile, Amy came and rudely interrupted their romantic conversation, and told Elizabeth that she would be arrested soon, and from what I heard. With this, Elizabeth knew that you had the stolen test papers. So I thought of a plan, and decided to ask her roommate for the same room. He delivers the package to Carl, and here, Carl received the package, opened it, and saw my hobbies from his pictures while he was naked, and it is clear that Elizabeth took his picture from the expelled. So Elizabeth asked Carl to make a false confession so that he would keep these pictures secret, and Carl was in a difficult situation, because it was done blackmail from two sides. After thinking about my thoughts, Carl stopped beside Elizabeth and said that I had never met him, and Elizabeth said that the most person in the school used drugs. And Elizabeth knew that Amy was the one who changed her. The offices are in his absence, and the lower stairs are in me, the test papers. And the upper stairs contain narcotic substances, but after that it is closed, and Amy is free of any idea about who is inside the upper stairs. Because of Elizabeth's allegations, the police stormed the school and started circling all the offices. They were able to take drugs in Amy's office, and he was arrested immediately, and this ended the war between them. In the last scene, Scott approached Elizabeth and asked him to go on a date and express his admiration to him, but surprisingly, Elizabeth refused Scott and told him that I had a smart, handsome person who was interested in my life, and turned to Russell and kissed him with enthusiasm. And their relationship seemed to be. Elizabeth canceled breast augmentation surgery because she still needed to attract the attention of the rich. The movie ends and Elizabeth becomes a serious teacher and helps all her students so that they achieve excellent grades from today and go. Elizabeth felt his mistake and negligence, and knew that life is not always about money and appearances. The end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.